I kind of came at Christianity in an odd way, I guess. I was not a Christian growing up, didn't have any Christians in my family, but I did have a skill set as a detective where I could evaluate whether witnesses were telling me the truth. And at 35, when I first became interested, I bought a Bible and I started to examine it to see if Christianity, if the Gospels, if the alleged eyewitness accounts of what happened in that first century environment with Jesus of Nazareth, was that true? Were those reports reliable? And given that skill set, I determined that Christianity was true. After I wrote books about the case for Christianity and the case for God's existence, I started teaching and speaking at local churches. And after a few of these, I started to realize that many of the Christians who would attend these church services had never thought about their Christian faith evidentially before. And some of them even asked me, do I really need to know this case? I mean, do I really need to know why this is true? So I started asking congregations, well, why are you guys Christians? Because for me, I became a Christian because of the evidence. But I discovered that's not true for everybody. And as I asked that question around the country, I got the same 3 answers in almost always the same order. So I started to predict this for the pastors where I would speak. I would say, hey, I want to ask your congregation. And I'll bet you they're going to give me these 3 answers, probably in this order. The first and most common response I get for why are you a Christian is, I was raised that way. My parents were Christians. I've been a Christian as long as I can remember. I was raised in the church. Okay, good answer. The second most popular answer is, I've had an experience that I can attribute to God. Something happened in my life. Either I was cured of something, I was delivered from something that demonstrated to me that Christianity was true. Good answer. The third question is kind of like the second and experiential. I used to be a jerk, and then I met Jesus. I'm not so much a jerk anymore. He transformed my life. Okay, great. As I thought about those 3 answers, I thought, wow, I've got a lot of family who are Mormon. They're LDS. And if you were to ask them, why are you a Mormon? They'll give you the same 3 answers in almost the same order. They've all been raised in the LDS church. They've all had an experience of the Holy Spirit, they say, that confirmed for them that Joseph Smith's a prophet and that Mormonism is true and the Book of Mormon is true. Do you see the problem? Our answers, it turned out, don't just sound like Mormon answers. They sound like Buddhist answers, like Muslim answers. Anyone of any worldview can say the same 3 things. I thought, well, okay, we need better answers. We need to know if this is true evidentially. Because otherwise, we're kind of sharing our testimony with each other, right? But I've got a testimony and they've got a testimony. This is the strength of testimony. How do we know if either of our views is actually true? Well, we have to take a new approach. If you're somebody who's been calling yourself a Christian, I get it. It's time to take another step. Because you're called, according to Peter in 1 Peter 3, you're called to be able to give the reason for the hope that you have. And Peter did it by always talking about what he saw as a direct evidence eyewitness. That's how he always proclaimed the gospel. We are called to be able to make the case for what we believe. So if you've been calling yourself a Christian, it's time to add the finish to the title. You're supposed to be a Christian case-maker. And if you've been a Christian but not a Christian case-maker, you've been living an abbreviated Christian life. We have really good answers for why Christianity is true. It's just time for both of us to learn them and become the best Christian case-makers we can be.
Several people actually wrote in asking about your testimony. They wondered if your work in forensics led to your faith, or were there relational factors? Or
Do you know that the most popular answer that people have for why they are Christians? I wrote about it in Forensic Faith. The most popular, singular by far and away, the most popular answer that people have for why they are Christians is they were raised that way. They grew up in the church. The second most popular answer is they've had some experience that they think demonstrates for them that Christianity is true. A miracle occurred in their life. It's a testimony of some nature. The 2 most popular answers for why Mormons think Mormonism is true: raised in the church. They've had an experience that demonstrated for them that Mormonism is true. Now, you don't think Mormonism is true, and you're right, it's not true. But your story sounds like theirs. Our story sounds just like theirs. If that doesn't lead them, look, you may have had an experience that led you to truth, but your experiences will not keep you from error. They haven't kept my family from error. So what really matters is this true? Now I'm going to tell you my testimony. So I was not interested really in any of this, but my wife was raised as a kind of a cultural Catholic. Didn't own a Bible, didn't really know much about it, but she was raised that way. And when we started having our boys, she was like, should we raise them in the church? I said, if you want to go, I'll be happy to go with you. My dad will go to this. He's not a believer, but he's happy to go to church. He loves living in a country that has a Judeo-Christian foundation. He thinks that this is a very useful delusion. Seriously. That teaches good morals, and it provides a great substructure for the culture and all of that. So I would have said the same thing. I'll go. Doesn't have to be true for it to be useful. So I was willing to go. But the first time I stepped foot in that church, that sneaky pastor, he pitched Jesus in a way that I could catch him. He simply said that Jesus was the smartest man who had ever lived. He said a bunch of other things too, but that's what I remember. So I thought, is that true? He said, oh yeah, all of Western culture has been grounded on the moral teaching of Jesus, really out of 2 sermons. Those 2 sermons changed the world. I'm like, really? So I bought a Bible. And as I'm reading through the Bible, it has the texture to me of eyewitness statements. One of the things that was so profound is that, I don't know if you know this or not, but witnesses never, ever, ever, ever agree. Ever. It could happen 5 minutes ago. They're not going to agree. There are going to be variations in their testimony. So the first thing we'll say when we go, I'm responding to a crime scene, I'll tell the dispatcher, hey, are there police officers are there, right? Yeah. Have them separate the eyewitnesses. Well, why do we? That's the only instruction I give before I come to a crime scene. Separate the eyewitnesses for me. Well, why? Because if you separate the eyewitness, if you don't, I'm going to get there. They're all going to tell me the exact same thing because they've been talking to each other. That's not of any use to me. I want there to be variations that I get to figure out, because in figuring out the variations, you get the most robust puzzle you put back together. Make sense? So the fact that the Gospels were not unified precisely in every detail was like, well, I had the ring of truth for me. So I started to examine them as eyewitness. And we're not talking about that in my talks, but that's what cold case Christianity is. It's really the case for the eyewitness reliability of the gospel authors. I think they're reliable. And then I was stuck with this dude who came out of the grave. What do you do with that guy? I'm weird. If you come out of if you walk out of the grave, I'm probably going to listen to you.
Yeah.
So that really changed everything for me. That's how I became a Christian.
Huh.
So, not much to it, really. And what I worry about, though, is I do worry that our testimonies, look, we're in a world right now where we are so absorbed with personal experience that testimonies are the highest order. And then what happens is you came to faith because somebody told you they had this great testimony and that you had some great testimony, and then that leader that you followed for years falls. The one whose testimony was so pivotal to you is now no longer walking with God. And then you're like, wow, if the whole thing is built on the transformational power that we hear about in testimonies, and then somebody falls, no, it was never built on that. I couldn't care less what your testimonies are. All I care about is what happened and is that true? That's all I want to know. Not what happened to you. I don't care what happened to you. What happened to Jesus of Nazareth? If he came out of the grave, I don't care if you believe it for 10 minutes and you run off and do 5 murders. It doesn't change whether or not Jesus came out of the grave. If there's good reason to believe that happened, your testimony is irrelevant. What matters is this true? So I'm concerned that we're in a generation right now where all we want to hear about is our personal story. Look, I don't want to shake the tree too hard here if this is how you've been doing it. But for me, as a skeptic, I don't care about your life and story. Am I the only one who's like that? Maybe. I'm the guy. Maybe I've been handling dead people too long.
Yeah, right. I was going to say.
That could be it.
I'm building a profile here.
I know, right? Jerk is one of the things you'll see in that profile.